Inside, bodies of mutilated victims were piled up in a corridor. Some were reported decapitated.
Inmates on the roof of the Regional Rehabilitation Center in the northern city of Altamira, while fellow prisoners battled it out below. Gang members in one prison block took over the cells of a rival gang. 16 prisoners were beheaded, dozens of others died from smoke inhalation when their cells were set on fire.
Blood-soaked hallways, raging fires, and the echoes of desperation. Prison riots have long been some of the most violent and haunting chapters in history. From gang-fueled massacres in Brazil to the brutal crackdowns at Attica, these uprisings reveal the darkest depths of overcrowded and corrupt prison systems. Whether sparked by cartel rivalries, oppressive conditions, or desperate escape attempts, the aftermath is often the same: devastation, death, and lingering questions of justice. In this deep dive, we unravel some of the deadliest prison riots, exposing the chaos, power struggles, and shocking realities that turned correctional facilities into war zones.
Now, staying with international news, a massive gang riot at a prison in northern Brazil has left around 60 people dead, marking one of the bloodiest cases of prison violence anywhere in the world in decades. Authorities in the city of Manaus say the death toll could rise as police get a better picture of the scale of the riot that was caused by a fight between rival drug gangs.
First up, we have the Manaus Prison Massacre, a brutal 15-hour rampage that left 56 inmates slaughtered in one of Brazil's deadliest prison riots.
According to Brazilian news outlets, a group of inmates exchanged gunfire with police and held 12 guards and dozens of other prisoners hostage. The riot pitted members of Brazil's most powerful drug gang, the PCC, with a local group tied to the Red Command, Brazil's second-largest criminal syndicate.
My son is imprisoned in there. I want to know about my son. My son is there. Look at this bullet.
On January 1st, 2017, at the Anicio Jobim Penitentiary Complex in Manaus, Brazil, a horrific massacre unfolded. It began during New Year's celebrations when members of the family of the North Gang suddenly seized control of the prison without warning. Their target, rival members of the PCC gang, also known as the First Command. What followed was a heinous 15-hour killing spree that left 56 inmates slaughtered. The attackers, armed with knives, homemade shivs, and smuggled pistols, unleashed a wave of violence that shocked the nation. The first victim was a former policeman, Moacir Jorge Pessoa da Costa, who was burned alive in his cell.
Now, staying with international news, a massive gang riot at a prison in northern Brazil has left around 60 people dead, marking one of the bloodiest cases of prison violence anywhere in the world in decades.
Over the next quarter of an hour, numerous prisoners were shot, stabbed, or both. 13 victims had their eyes cut out, and 2 had their hearts ripped from their chests, organs that were then used to terrorize the other inmates as they watched in horror. But it didn't stop there. Some of the terrified prisoners and even guards were forced to eat severed body parts. One guard was made to eat an eyeball, while a prisoner was forced to bite into a heart. Once the gang members had finished, they lined up 39 severed heads on the floor of Pavilion 3 as a chilling warning. At around 6:30 p.m., authorities attempted to negotiate with the gang, but it wasn't until 7:30 a.m. the next morning that the hostages were finally released, bringing an end to the 15-hour-long rebellion. At number 2, we have the El Rodeo prison riot, one of the deadliest and most intense prison standoffs in Venezuela's history. June 2011, on the outskirts of Caracas, Venezuela, inside the El Rodeo prison complex, a brutal riot unfolded, resulting in 29 gruesome deaths. It all began on June 12th, when an argument between rival gangs escalated into a full-blown riot. Gunfire erupted, and machetes were thrown, leaving bloodied bodies scattered across the prison. When guards attempted to intervene, they were either burned alive or hacked to death. By the time the first outbreak of violence subsided, 25 bodies lay slaughtered. But the horror didn't end there. 5 days later, on June 17th, the chaos spread to the neighboring El Rodeo 2 facility. When National Guard soldiers attempted to restore order, they were met with a hail of gunfire, igniting a violent standoff. Meanwhile, the bodies of the dead were left to rot inside the prison, and anyone who attempted to escape was shot on sight. The grueling standoff lasted 27 days, during which the prison became a battleground, with inmates seizing full control. As the crisis dragged on, it attracted national attention and scoured headlines. After nearly a month of terror, on July 14, 2011, the standoff finally came to an end after government officials pleaded with the gangs. In the aftermath, 1,019 prisoners were set free. But even with this resolution, the riot left 29 inmates and guards massacred, their bodies left to rot inside the prison for an entire month. Next up, at number 3, is the Carandiru Massacre, one of the most infamous prison massacres in history, where military police brutally ended a rebellion, leaving 111 inmates dead.
A polícia militar foi chamada. Após uma negociação fracassada com os presos, o comando policial decidiu entrar à força, com metralhadoras, fuzis e pistolas. Meia hora de repressão policial e 111 presos mortos. Foi o maior massacre da história do sistema carcerário brasileiro.
October 2nd, 1992, in São Paulo, Brazil, what began as a fight between two inmates during a football match quickly escalated into a full-scale rebellion. By 2 p.m., prisoners were burning mattresses and barricading cell block doors. The authorities reacted instantly, trying to reason with the prisoners. But when this failed, military police stormed the prison, massacring 111 inmates in just 30 minutes. The horror left behind was gruesome and disturbing. Each inmate was an average of 5 times, with most victims found bearing defensive wounds, meaning they were killed while surrendering or desperately trying to save themselves. In the aftermath, a total of 515 bullets were recovered from the bodies. But what was truly chilling was that not a single officer was killed or even injured during the entire operation. It was clear that the police had unleashed an unwarranted and heinous level of violence. When news of the massacre broke, horrifying images of naked, bloodied bodies piled in the prison courtyard leaked to the press, shocking the public. And the gruesome details didn't stop there. Accounts surfaced of bodies and prisoners attempting to infect officers with HIV using their bodily fluids. It was later uncovered that the military had fired approximately 3,500 bullets within just 20 minutes, with most victims point blank in the chest and head. Autopsies further revealed that many inmates were executed while already surrendered, kneeling or lying down.
2 de outubro de 1992. A tragédia ficou marcada na história do país. E tá até hoje na lembrança de quem viveu as cenas de terror.
Eu lembro de uma carnificina, né? De uma matança, de massacre, de uma coisa assim que terrível.
O saldo oficial foi de 111 mortos.
The result of this cruel injustice would go on to shape Brazil's criminal underworld. From the surviving inmates, a new and notorious criminal organization was born, the Primeiro Comando da Capital, also known as the PCC, formed as an act of revenge for the violence they endured.
Then the PCC came along.
It learned to govern the prison system and to bring order to the prison system, to a prison system that was incredibly violent. There was violence among prisoners, there was exploitation of prisoners by one another, there was prison rape and prison theft and murders. And the PCC and other prison gangs learned to bring order.
Coming in at number 4 is the Altamira Prison Massacre, another horrifying chapter in Brazil's history of prison violence.
At least 57 inmates have been killed in a deadly poison. In fact, it was a prison riot in Brazil's Pará state. Violence broke as 2 rival gangs clashed with each other. In fact, there were witnesses as bodies of 16 victims were found decapitated.
On July 29, 2019, hell broke loose inside the Altamira prison in Pará, Brazil. A brutal war between rival gangs, Comando Class A, CCA, and Comando Vermelho, CV, exploded into a 5-hour bloodbath. It started around 7 a.m. CV members were sitting down for breakfast when a group of CCA members stormed their area, setting it on fire and launching into a frenzy of violence. 16 inmates were butchered, beheaded, and shot, their severed heads used to terrify the survivors. As the flames spread, smoke filled the overcrowded prison, suffocating 46 more prisoners.
Inmates on the roof of the Regional Rehabilitation Center in the northern city of Altamira, while fellow prisoners battled it out below. Gang members in one prison block took over the cells of a rival gang. 16 prisoners were Dozens of others died from smoke inhalation when their cells were set on fire.
When the smoke cleared, the scene was pure carnage. Charred corpses lay beneath the rubble. Mutilated bodies were scattered across blood-soaked floors. But the slaughter wasn't over. CCA members hunted down 4 more victims, suffocating them and sawing through their bodies while they were still alive, using crude, homemade blades. By the time the assault finally ended, 62 inmates were dead. Only later did the full extent of the prison's chaos come to light. Severely overcrowded and dangerously understaffed, with just 33 guards responsible for more than 450 inmates. The massacre didn't just happen, it was inevitable. At number 5 is the Rima Prison Massacre, a bloody gang war that broke out during visiting hours, leaving 25 inmates slaughtered and 100 family members held hostage. On a normal Sunday morning, October 16, 2016, the Rima prison in Boa Vista, Brazil, bustled with activity as visitors arrived to see their imprisoned loved ones. Meanwhile, rival gangs within the overcrowded facility eyed each other warily. Suddenly, the calm of visiting hours shattered. A violent clash erupted between opposing gang members, quickly engulfing the prison in chaos. Screams filled the air as prisoners attacked one another with makeshift weapons. In the pandemonium, around 100 visitors were trapped, becoming unwilling hostages in the bloody conflict. As the riot raged, the violence escalated to horrific levels. Prisoners were beheaded, their severed heads becoming gruesome trophies in the gang war. Others were burned alive, their agonized cries echoing through the prison halls. The death toll mounted rapidly, with at least 25 inmates losing their lives. For hours, the prison remained a war zone, with authorities struggling to regain control. Eventually, police managed to subdue the rioters and free the hostages. But as the full extent of the carnage was unveiled, Brazil was forced to confront the grim reality of its prison system, a deadly potion of overcrowding, neglect, and untamed gang violence that had yet again exploded into a deadly prison riot. Taking the number 6 spot is the infamous Attica prison riot, one of the deadliest prison uprisings in American history, leaving 43 people dead and sparking nationwide outrage.
I remember guys getting to pieces. I seen a guy, they took his head off and blood was pouring out of the stem where his neck was. I thought I was gonna die.
New York, September 1971. On a scorching summer's morning, Attica Correctional Facility exploded into chaos. Years of overcrowding, brutal conditions, and racial injustice had pushed inmates to the edge. Over 1,200 prisoners rose up, overpowering the guards and seizing control. In the chaos, they took 42 staff members hostage and barricaded themselves inside D-Yard. The world watched in shock as they issued their demands: basic human rights and better treatment. For 4 tense days, the prison yard became a world of its own. Inmates organized food, built shelters, and negotiated with officials. Hope flickered, but it wouldn't last.
10:05 a.m. September 13th. We're on the roof of A block, waiting for the assault to begin. The hostages are on the catwalks with knives at their throats.
On September 13th, Governor Nelson Rockefeller, after consulting with President Nixon, gave the order. At 9:46 a.m., helicopters thundered overhead, tear gas rained down, and then gunfire followed. Less than an hour later, it was over. 29 inmates and 10 hostages lay dead, almost all killed by police bullets. Survivors faced brutal retaliation as authorities crushed the rebellion. The Attica uprising, born from desperation and drowned in blood, shook the nation. It sparked outrage, igniting a battle over prisoners' rights that still goes on today.
When they stormed the prison, they came in dropping gas and shooting guns.
For number 7, we have the Lucasville prison riot, an 11-day siege over religious beliefs that ended in 10 inmates violently killed and a facility in ruins.
At 3:15, convicts returning from an exercise yard stage a fight, then jump corrections officers and seize control of cell block L. In the riot, 8 corrections officers are taken hostage and at least 5 inmates are killed, beaten so badly that police only repeat the details in whispers.
Easter Sunday, April 11th, 1993. At the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, Muslim inmates were angry about mandatory tuberculosis testing that went against their religious beliefs. What began as a protest quickly spiraled out of control. Prisoners overwhelmed guards and seized control of L Block, the prison's main housing unit. Chaos erupted as over 400 inmates, including members of rival gangs, joined the uprising. In the mayhem, 8 guards were taken hostage. The first hours were the bloodiest. 5 inmates, suspected of being informants, were brutally murdered. Some stabbed over 20 times in a frenzy of violence. As news of the riot spread, authorities scrambled to respond, and the prison was surrounded.
The voice on the phone was wrong. Instead, the body of a 6th dead inmate is found dumped in the prison yard. Tuesday is day 3. Instead of an end to the siege, Lucasville sees more death. An 8th inmate is found, and there is new trouble, as prisoners in cell block K, next door to the hostage block, join the uprising, breaking sinks and breaking toilets to try to flood their block.
Days passed in a tense standoff. Inmates trashed cell blocks, causing millions in damage. On the 5th day, frustration peaked. To prove they were serious, rioters strangled guard Robert Vallandigham. For 11 long days, the world watched as authorities worked to resolve the crisis. Then, on April 21st, a breakthrough finally came. After officials agreed to a 21-point list of prisoner demands, the inmates surrendered. Emerging from the L Block, the toll was heavy. 9 inmates and 1 guard dead. 5 prisoners were sentenced to death for their roles in the riot, and dozens more received long sentences. In the end, the Lucasville uprising left deep scars, forcing Ohio's prison system to carry out huge reforms. Up next, for number 7, we have the Attica prison feud, a brutal battle between lethal cartels that left 44 inmates butchered.
At least 52 people have died in a riot and fire at a prison in Mexico. A dispute between rival drug gangs is said to have triggered the tragedy in the northeastern city of Monterrey. Reports say some inmates were angry at authorities re-establishing their control of the jail and that the violence was linked to an escape attempt.
In the early hours of February 19, 2012, chaos erupted at Attica prison near Monterrey, Mexico. As inmates slept, corrupt guards secretly allowed members of the notorious Zetas cartel to enter a rival cell block. What followed was a brutal massacre. Armed with makeshift weapons, the Zetas launched a savage attack on their sleeping enemies from the Gulf cartel. In the darkness, screams and the sounds of violence echoed through the prison. By sunrise, 44 Gulf cartel members lay dead, their bodies left to rot across the blood-soaked cell block.
50 people died and 12 were injured. They need medical attention at the hospital. 5 of them are in critical condition.
As the carnage unfolded inside, 30 high-ranking Zetas members slipped away, escaping with the help of prison officials. The riot served as a deadly distraction, allowing the Zetas to settle scores and free their comrades in one brutal night. The aftermath exposed the deep corruption within Mexico's prison system. The prison director and 28 guards were arrested for their role in the massacre and escape. To this day, the Attica prison riot remains a chilling reminder of the cartel's power and how even the authorities can't challenge them.
A brutal fight broke out between what officials have said to be 2 rival factions at Topo Chico prison in Monterrey, Mexico on February 11th. Just shortly after midnight, explosive sounds were heard and a fire broke out. Officials confirmed that prisoners had set fire to the food storage and sleeping areas.
Now, for number 9, we have the Topo Chico prison riot, another cartel-fueled massacre that left 49 inmates dead. Afterward, police discovered that cartel members had been secretly living in luxury inside the prison.
Authorities in Mexico say about 50 detainees died after a prison riot in the northeast of the country. Angry relatives gathered outside the Topo Chico facility, notorious for its violence.
Surveillance cameras capture Mexican prison riot that killed 49. New footage from the February 11th prison riot in Monterrey, Mexico shows the moment 2 rival gang factions started fighting.
February 2016, as the clock struck midnight at Topo Chico prison in Monterrey, Mexico, 2 rival factions of the notorious Zetas drug cartel unleashed fury upon each other. The overcrowded facility became a war zone. Inmates wielded makeshift weapons, sharpened objects, bats, and sticks as they fought for control. For nearly 40 minutes, the battle raged. Prisoners were stabbed mercilessly, beaten to pulps, and some even burned alive. Smoke filled the air as fires spread, adding to the hellish scene. Amidst the carnage, a guard accidentally shot an inmate who was trying to protect female prisoners. When the dust settled, 49 bodies lay strewn across the prison grounds. The aftermath revealed not just the horrific violence, but also the deep corruption that had allowed it to fester. Investigators uncovered luxury cells with king-size beds, air conditioning, and even portable saunas.
Surveillance cameras captured a large number of prisoners in the courtyard of the prison at 10:48 p.m. Prison guards took shelter in one building as a large group of the Zeta 27 drug gang attacked a cell block housing a rival gang leader, causing a melee. Prisoners could also be seen setting fire to the food storage area and cell block.
The Topo Chico riot, brief but brutal, exposed the deep-rooted issues infesting Mexico's prison system: overcrowding, cartel control, and corruption. Last but not least, we have the San Quentin prison clash, a failed escape attempt that spiraled into a murderous riot, leaving 3 officers and 4 inmates dead.
August 21st, 1971, San Quentin. 3 guards and 2 prisoners killed in an alleged escape attempt. George Jackson shot dead.
San Quentin State Prison, August 21st, 1971. A prisoner called George Jackson, a key figure in the Black Liberation Movement, managed to get his hands on a 9mm pistol during a meeting with his attorney, Stephen Bingham. Hiding the weapon beneath a wig as he was being escorted back to his cell, George suddenly pulled out the gun and shouted, "The dragon has come." Then, in a flash, George freed other inmates, unleashing a wave of violence that would leave a mark on the prison's history forever. For 33 frenzied minutes, the prison became a war zone. When the dust settled, 6 lives had been claimed, 3 guards and 3 inmates, including George himself. In the wake of the gory attack, the event, now known as the deadliest day in San Quentin's history, started a 16-month trial and continues to fuel debates about prison conditions and race in the American justice system.
Jackson has the keys. All he has to do is unlock the front door. And he went out and attempted to run.
George Jackson, according to witnesses, he goes out into that yard with the pistol in hand, waving it around.
These were the bloodiest prison massacres ever exposed. Rampant violence, severed heads, and prisons transformed into slaughterhouses. But who's truly responsible? Is the justice system failing, or are some criminals simply beyond saving? Make sure you let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know about the latest updates and insider stories.